A new poll shows former Vice President Joe Biden with a double-digit lead over his next closest competitors, Senators Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders. The national poll, which comes from the Morning Consult, shows Biden as the first choice of 33% of respondents, followed by Sanders at 20% and Warren at 15%. Those results are quite different from a poll released by Monmouth University on Monday. That showed Biden, Warren, and Sanders in a virtual three-way tie for first. Joining me now are Elizabeth Landers, Zach Hudak, and Cara Korte. Elizabeth is a Washington correspondent for Vice News Tonight. Zach is a CBS News campaign reporter covering Elizabeth Warren. And Cara is a CBS News campaign reporter covering Bernie Sanders. Welcome to all of you. Elizabeth, let me start with you. On Monday, Joe Biden's pollster wrote off the Monmouth poll that showed him in a tie as an outlier. Does the Biden team feel Tuesday's poll confirms that?
I think so, yes. I spoke with someone on the Biden campaign a little earlier today, and they're still standing by the fact that that Monmouth poll is an outlier, and they are pointing to the Morning Consult poll today as a better indicator of where Joe Biden stands in the field. And the Morning Consult poll that came out today did survey many, many more people than that Monmouth poll did. So there is some truth in them pointing to the fact that that Monmouth poll had a small sample size and is an outlier, but it is, of course, also unflattering for them, so they do not want to hang their hats on that kind of poll right now.
Right. Well, Cara, you have been digging in a little deeper into that Monmouth poll regarding which voters Bernie Sanders is gaining support with, and what did you find there?
Well, if you look at this poll, which was a national poll of Democratic voters, their last Monmouth poll was in June. And since then, in that time, Bernie Sanders is now leading with non-white voters and non-college educated voters. He has surged 7 points in both of those groups, taking the lead from Vice President Biden. And that just shows, if you believe this poll, an outlier to the Biden campaign is going to be always embraced by the Sanders campaign. But if you believe that, that means that the Sanders campaign is hitting exactly who they are trying to target.
Right. And Zach, we have seen Elizabeth Warren's support steadily rise as the summer progresses. Now she is drawing crowds of 12,000 and 15,000. Does her campaign believe her momentum is going to keep building as the campaign progresses?
Elaine, they do, but they hate talking about polls from the very beginning, when at that time it was obvious why they might not want to. She wasn't doing that well.
Right.
But even now, I was asking them questions about polls, and they really try to stay focused on the message. They've been saying that no matter how she's doing out in the field, they have the same game plan going on here, and that is a grassroots strategy that was meant to start at the bottom and end up snowballing, as it seems we're seeing right now.
Well, you know, Elizabeth, we often hear comparisons between Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders because they're seen as two of the sort of farthest left in this Democratic primary. But are they actually getting their support from the same types of voters?
This is interesting. I was out with Bernie on Sunday and Monday in Kentucky and in Pennsylvania. Sort of working class union voters there was who Bernie was talking to. And I talked to probably 7 or 8 different people when we were out and said, who do you like the best? And almost everyone that I spoke with said, I like Bernie Sanders and I like Elizabeth Warren. I think that part of the struggle that Bernie has in this campaign race as compared to 2016 is that Elizabeth Warren is just as progressive as he is on a lot of issues. She wants to take on Wall Street. She wants to eliminate college debt, a lot of the same things that Bernie Sanders wants to do. And right now, Bernie is reluctant to go after her, which is even more interesting. He was asked, I believe, on the campaign trail, and I'm sure Zach and Cara could speak to this, but he was asked recently, what's the difference between you and Elizabeth Warren? And he said, I'm going to let voters decide that. I pressed him on that when I interviewed him on Sunday, and he will not criticize Elizabeth Warren right now.
Yeah, could you just give us some context, Cara? I mean, they're friends in addition to obviously being competitors, but they really do have a friendship here, so there has been this reluctance.
There is, but if he is not using his words to define himself between Elizabeth Warren, he is in his policies. What Elizabeth Warren does not have a plan for is union members. And that is what Bernie Sanders just released last week, a plan for a pro-union working class plan. He wants to double the amount of union members in the United States. And so he may not be willing to vocally criticize Elizabeth Warren, but those who are watching, if you're a union member and you're trying to distinguish yourself between her and he he has a plan right now and she does not.
Yeah, and in fact, on that point, Cara, he just received his first national union endorsement of the campaign. How important is that going to be to the Sanders campaign to court that labor support?
It's a great start for them. He's the second candidate so far in this race to get an international union endorsement. Vice President Biden preceded him with the firefighters union. The UE, the United Electric Workers Union, is a bit small. It's only about 30,000 workers, but it is a start, and this is exactly who he wants to appeal to. It can be a building block, and they're hoping that it will only snowball from there.
Meantime, Zach, there is an article out in the New York Times this week about how Elizabeth Warren is quietly engaging with Democratic Party insiders. What did we learn from that?
We learned that the senator is essentially going to the establishment leaders, the people who behind the scenes have a lot of influence in the party. And she's telling them, look, I'm not here to burn the house down. If I get the nomination, I will work to push forward a Democratic agenda. If I don't, I will still support the candidate that does. About a month ago, she signed a pledge that, among other things, she would give over the voter data that she accumulated to the DNC. That's almost a direct response to Sanders refusing to do so in 2016. At the same time, throughout all of this, her public message is very different. She's talking about big structural change, and repeatedly, she says, we want to end lobbying as we know it. Those are things that are going to affect both the DNC and the RNC.
Yeah. Elizabeth, when you compare these two routes, Warren chasing party insiders and Sanders chasing outside labor groups, what does that tell you about how the two approach campaigning?
Well, I think that the Bernie approach to union members is something that has been a core part of his base. And frankly, Bernie is not beloved by a lot of the party insiders. So I think for him, it's probably a waste of his time to do something like that. Whereas for Elizabeth Warren, she's from Massachusetts, and she, has won big important races in the past, and so she's a little bit more embraced by probably people in the party than Bernie is. So I think for her that probably makes a lot more sense for her campaign right now than it does for his.
Zach, in addition to Elizabeth Warren, you also cover billionaire Democratic donor and presidential candidate Tom Steyer. He is 2% poll away from making the debate stage in Houston next month. There are two more polls being released from Quinnipiac and USA Today before Wednesday's deadline to qualify. If he does not make the debate, what is he doing to make sure that he is on the debate stage in October?
Elaine, if he doesn't make the debate, he's still on a daily basis on the television screens of voters in these primary states. He's spending just, more than every other candidate combined in certain hotbeds of primary voters. And on top of all that, he has a lot of voter data. We don't know exactly how much data he purchased from his PAC, Need to Impeach, but we know that they have email addresses on almost 9 million people. So Tom Steyer has a lot of money to play with and a lot of voters he could target directly. And he pledged to spend $100 million, so I don't think he's going anywhere anytime soon.
All right, Elizabeth Landers, Zach Hudak, and Cara, Korte, great to have you all. Thank you so much.